Oh, good morning to good evening to everybody.
Is it morning where you are, Ollie?
I don't know. It's been such a long day. I don't know how time's gone so fast. I've been rushed off my feet all day, and it's miserable weather, eh?
Well, it is. It's horrible. But in fairness, I know on occasions my sister in Perth in Australia watches. So you're saying good morning to her and all our other listeners or viewers on that side of the world. It is morning, but it's very much nighttime. And as you said, dirty old weather here the last few days. How, by the way, though, is Pritchard Wildlife Park coming along?
It's pretty good. Nobody's managed to kill each other. The fish have really picked up in the last week, actually. Thanks for asking. They're really looking a lot brighter. They're swimming around a lot more. I'm quite happy about that.
Excellent, wonderful. Well, I guess I'm going to get on with things because my biggest concern is yesterday the electricity went here about 5 times, so I hope it doesn't go tonight. But let's get moving on with things. And appropriately enough, for the 12th of November, Ollie, this is our 12th installment. And coming up on what is Colombia's only live and interactive English language chat show, what, we asked you, is in a name. Names used in Colombia, in any case. Are you a Usnavy, who's always thought there was something fishy about your name? Why is it that some names appear reserved for the upper classes only here? Colombians and foreigners who've had children together, when it came to naming your little angels, or should I say Angel, did much disagreement ensue? Get in touch with us right now using the live comment facility here on Facebook. Or if you're watching this recorded, you can write to us via the medium on which you're viewing us, or simply send a tweet, as always, to @Bogotá. We do love to hear from you. But before all that, it's our news roundup, and we've got another 2 big World Cup qualifiers coming up for La Selección over the next few days. As always, a welcome respite from the pandemic. We'll talk about that shortly, but first, Ollie, details have emerged of, well, to say the least, a very disturbing case of what appears to be police not only allowing a number of young people to burn to what became their eventual deaths in a station in Soacha in the southern regions of the outskirts of Bogotá, but actually ensuring that this happened, their actions did. So what do we know about this so far?
Well, the short answer is, Brendan, not very much. As is so often the case in Colombia, and, we all know that this is a huge problem. Somebody's lying, Brendan, but we don't know who it is. The police have got one version of a story. The families of the poor young men who died have another story. And it's really hard. I mean, it's entirely possible that anybody could be telling the truth, lying or embellishing pieces, and we just don't know what's going on. Well, I think if I had to come down on one side, I would be inclined to come down on the side of the families rather than the police in Bogotá, given previous incidents and lies. It certainly sounds. Was it premeditated? Was it a tragic accident? Very hard to know.
Because these young children I'm saying children, but adolescents and maybe in their early 20s, youths, yeah. These were youths that had problems or previous with the police. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we're not going down the path of victim blaming, but yes, they were in the cells for a reason, fundamentally.
Okay. And of course, we have to say that this just didn't happen in the last week. This is something that happened now more than 2 months ago.
Yeah, again, it's very hard to really. There's a lot of sifting. This was before those that very strange week in September that we had. It's kind of a precursor to that, which feels odd, actually. And it's amazing that there's no real traction on this until the young men in question died of their wounds. Just to fill everyone in here, if you're not familiar with what Brendan and I are talking about. We're in a bit of a bizarre situation where fundamentally 11 young boys held in a car in a police center in Soacha, to the south of Bogotá. I mean, let's be honest, it's Bogotá. I know they always say it's Cundinamarca, but in reality it's Bogotá. And again, this is where the conflict breaks in. Something seems to have happened where a fire started out, whether that was by the police or by the youths. There then seems to have been an artifact, seems to me very bizarre language, which made the fire, which aggravated the fire, made it bigger. Again, the police say that was nothing to do with them, that this was, produced by the young men themselves. The family members are saying that it was the police that chucked in this artifact. Then, the fires got pretty heavy, and the police have not let the young men out until too late. Whether that's through bungling or whether that's through, incompetence or whether that's through maliciousness. Again, either of those are reasonable possibilities, frankly. Hard to know, very hard to know.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, will we ever get to the bottom of it? I think there is a video that shows, because reading the report of one of the mothers who was interviewed, that she said you can see in the video where the police were just being indifferent and didn't act at all, which wouldn't come as a surprise in some quarters. But I wonder, are there official cameras? And of course, then if this was police negligence, to say the least, are we ever going to see those cameras? They could easily disappear.
Right. I mean, this is much like the whole thing in the UK, and I'm sure in Ireland as well, of pinning cameras to police uniforms. It's amazing how often those cameras seem to get damaged, obscured, all that sort of thing. Yes, technically there should be some sort of footage. Good luck finding it. Good luck getting hold of it. And actually, Brendan, what we've seen time and time again with the police in Bogotá is that even when there is footage of them acting appallingly, they seem to be able to get away with it. Now, something that I find very interesting about this case, something that's really puzzling to me, is we're talking about 9 young men dead. And it's surprising to me that because this is Soacha and these are urban deaths, there's really not a big thing about it. It doesn't seem to have hit the headlines or hit social media in the same way the recent massacres in Cauca, for example, have. And I wonder if there's a difference in the way that... And actually, thinking back to the police riots in September, I don't think there was that much of an outrage at that time either, compared to some of the other things that have sort of hit the headlines recently. And I do wonder if there is a thing in Colombia where we tend not to... We tend to treat urban deaths as being somehow more natural and more normal, and they don't seem to generate the same sort of headlines.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think maybe another mitigating factor in this particular case is that the youths didn't die on the spot, that they were taken to hospital and, from what I gathered, died over the weeks to come. So it wasn't like a massacre that you'd see, and it's found where 9 people are dead in one spot. So maybe that, it shouldn't lessen it, but it might be playing on... Well,
they were dead in one spot, as it were, but yes, not in one moment, I suppose. I mean, in a way, it's worse. I mean, dying of your wounds, over months must be agony. I mean, 1st and 2nd degree burns, that's some pretty serious things. I mean, there's some pretty horrible accounts by... the mother of one of the victims, who was interviewed in El Tiempo, I think, yesterday. Shocking business, Brendan, absolutely shocking.
Yeah, and I think one of the mothers as well said that it was actually, or this was a headline in Blue Radio today, that it was smoke inhalation. But I mean, obviously horrific, the way these youths suffered. And as you said, very strange that it's not getting, doesn't seem to be getting much attention whatsoever. But one of those cases that I guess we'll see what happens in the in the coming weeks or months. And again, I guess another element, and people might feel that we're always having a go at the police here, but it's just, I mean, these are things that happen in this country. But again, class plays an issue. I'm sure if this had happened in an Estrato 4 or 5, and we were talking about, there'd be non-stop coverage.
But of course it wouldn't, would it? That's the...
Well, it wouldn't, yeah. Very unlikely. By the way, just when we're talking about the police, I heard a little anecdote yesterday. A friend of a friend, if I can say, but they were on their moto, and they were around this neck of the woods, as in the far north of the city. And I think they made some minor infraction at a traffic light, and they didn't realize the police were there, so they were pulled over. And of course, it would have meant that the motorbike would have been confiscated and locked up. And all told, I think the whole episode, if they had gone through the official lines, would have been about 900,000. And then they'd have to go and do a course for the infraction. You have to do like a day's course to remedy yourself, so you won't make the same mistake twice. So I believe 50,000 was handed over to the two police officers, and everybody went about their business. Everybody wins. What do you think of that, Ollie?
Well, actually, it's interesting you mentioned that. I did notice motorbikes being pulled over today on the Tracé as we were moving around furniture. And I did say to the guy that was driving the van, the men with Ven that were helping me move stuff around, I said to the guy, look, I've never actually seen private cars be pulled over. I've seen taxis and motorcyclists and cyclists and buses and all kinds I've seen pulled over, when the police stop and pull over, 20 people at a go and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Never ever seen it happen to private cars. Never. Okay,
I do see the odd few private cars here on the autopista.
Oh yes, I will see one or two being pulled over. Yes, I've never seen them being pulled over in groups.
Yeah,
these were basically every motorcyclist coming down the Tracé was being pulled over and frisked.
Okay. Well, anyway, guys, we do like to hear from you, so do send us comments if you're watching us live here on Facebook, or if you're watching it as a recorded thing, you can get in touch with us with the Twitter handle at Bogotá Post, Bogotá's #1 English language newspaper, of which Ollie Pritchard is the deputy editor. There he is in all his glory. And also coming up in the second half of the show, just to let you know, we're going to be talking about names in Colombia and the strange uses of them, the oddities that you can find, from an English language perspective, perhaps. So do get in touch with us. And also, if you're married to a Colombian or you're Colombian married to a foreigner, how was the naming process if you've children? How did that go along? Do let us know. Send us your thoughts. Right now, we'll be dealing with that in about 20 minutes. Are we going to go to Semana and talk about the competition right now, Ollie? I know they might have a live program at this moment in time, but Semana, they owe me money as well if they're listening. That in a bit. But there's been a few changes there, and a woman who, she's about as divisive as Álvaro Uribe, you could say, in this country. Vicky Dávila is taking the helm.
Yeah, and I find it bizarre that she's divisive. I was thinking about this as I made dinner earlier today. That sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback there. I was thinking about this earlier as I was making dinner, and I actually don't think, in my mind, and I don't know, Brendan, you tell me, certainly thinking about British journalists, I think, honestly, Vicky Dávila would be considered quite tame, really. We certainly wouldn't consider her as being a particularly outspoken person or a particularly, muckraking person. I actually think, when we look at things like the Comunidad del Anillo incident that she got so much criticism for and was forced to resign from that position, I thought at the time, and I still do think now, pretty good story. It's explosive journalism. I don't understand there's a lot of conservatism, I think, when people kind of say, oh, well, you know, she shouldn't do that, it's unprofessional, blah, blah, blah. It was a good story, it was explosive, she got it out. I don't think that's particularly bad journalism. I mean, if what people are saying is that that's substantially untrue, that's a different thing, but
yeah,
you know, I think she took a risk.
Well,
and
yeah. Because I was going to say, as the story goes, I mean, a person now is a persona non grata, Daniel Coronel at Semana, a Florida-based Colombian journalist. I mean, if he had come out with that story, exposed
different story.
The Lord of the Rings. Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a fair point that she comes in for unfair criticism. I will say, and this happened, I think it was earlier this year, or maybe at the end of last year, but there's a kind of famous or infamous interview with
Hassan.
the former, Hassan Nassar, and talking about interesting names. Hassan Nassar is certainly one for a Colombian, obviously with the Middle Eastern background. But he was former of RCN territory, and now he's press officer for Duque. And they got into a real shouting match. Now, she got criticism because people were saying she should have controlled it much better. It looked like an argument that you'd see down in your barrio tienda on a Friday or Saturday night. I wouldn't disagree with that either. I thought she maybe lost the run of herself and kind of didn't maintain her professionalism. It seemed like she was about to smash the computer at one stage that she was doing the interview on. But so I can understand that side. But I think it's fair to say in this kind of misogynistic country that we have, that at times people look at Vicky Dávila and then there'll be jealousy from other women as well, perhaps, and kind of having a go at her. But it'll be very interesting to see how Semana goes now, because a few of the heavy hitters have left in this new regime, and it has. I've seen some people writing that the standards have fallen rather dramatically over the last few years. I can't comment on it because I can't really say what it was like a few years ago. It's not something I knew about. And people will think, oh, well, Brendan's not going to say anything because he had a podcast with Semana, and that's what I meant when I said they owe me money. But no, I mean, I never felt that I was working for Semana. I just used their facilities. And look, they were always good to me for whatever, but minus any payment. That was the only thing that was missing. But anything else to say on that, Ali?
Well, I mean, I think all of those points are fairly good. I would say, along with El Espectador, Semana's a really good example of kind of journalism for people. I mean, good journalism, let's be honest. I mean, it's regularly good journalism. I'm always surprised that, given they've literally got a week to produce every edition, the amount of mistakes there are in it irritates me. But nonetheless, generally good journalism, some excellent, fantastic writers. I mean, you mentioned Daniel Coronel earlier. Just to be very clear, without a shadow of a doubt, the best journalist in Colombia, for my money. But I think the thing is that Semana is one of those magazines that's kind of, I think it's much like Time magazine in the States. It's aimed at people who think of themselves as being a great deal more clever than they actually are. And that's the same with Espectador. When was the last time you ever read anything in Espectador and found it vaguely interesting? I usually get about 3 paragraphs through and I think, oh, for God's sake, get to the point. Where is this going? It's just so round the houses, nothing direct about it. And when you talk about that interview with Hassan, I do this all the time with students. I say, my gosh, have a look at Jeremy Paxman, who is lauded as a fantastic journalist in England until his retirement. Much more aggressive than anybody I've seen ever in Colombia. I thought, again, yes, it got a bit petty. Yes, she probably shouldn't have sunk to Hassan's level. But, I mean, fundamentally, it's slightly funny, and absolutely, it's what I want a journalist to be doing, going after somebody. I don't want them to be sitting back and going, oh, great, oh, thank you. Oh, I'm so glad to hear your point of view. I'm not going to contest it. No, go for it. They give you bullshit. You give them words back, frankly.
Well, of course, yeah, and they have to ask the question that people listening want to ask. And,
No,
and
but,
the other thing
that's
is,
the thing, but they don't. When was the last time you saw that in Colombian journalism? It virtually never happens. In mainstream journalism,
yeah.
very rarely happens. Very rarely.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. Yeah, Colombian, very, very rarely. The other thing about that little Hassan Nassar incident, of course, he's Duque's man, and a lot of people equate Vicky Dávila with right of centre, almost Uribista, things like that. So she's clearly not. I mean, she talks to Petro. She has Petro regularly on her weekday show on Semana as well. So I think she's as balanced as you can get. I mean, look, I don't buy in this impartial reporter rubbish, but she's pretty balanced.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was likening it the other day to the BBC, who are regularly criticised in England for being too left-wing or too right-wing. Now, Paola Andrea Perez makes a really good point here, which is slightly controversial. I don't know if you can see the comment yet.
Yeah, I can.
Now, she says here that Vicky is a promoter of kleptocracy, whose corruption is evident as the way she speaks about others. Now, I think what Paola's talking about here is Vicky's husband, who I want to be a bit careful legally here where we go, but yes, there's certainly shadows hanging over him, shall we say, and that's definitely not a positive. I would also say that, as you mentioned, politically, Vicky Davila's not my cup of tea. That's very different to her as a journalist, I feel.
Yeah, and I mean, the counter-argument might be as well, if you wanted clean as a whistle journalists and politicians and CEOs in Colombia, well, there'd be nobody running the country. But you could say that's being a bit cynical. Anyway, I'll leave that to one side. Going from Vicky Dávila, and you said mentioning her politics, diplomats generally stay out of politics, Ollie, and don't like to get involved, especially ambassadors in countries, but Fernando Pacho Santos, he decided to, or Francisco, I should say, Francisco Pacho Santos decided that Trump was the man to win this election, and people are laughing at Trump. Maybe he's got a big surprise coming in the next couple of weeks, and he's going to overturn what looks like a Biden victory. But anyway, Pacho Santos is getting pressure from his own first cousin, the former president, Juan Manuel Santos, to step aside as the Colombian ambassador in Washington. And
you'd have to think that Juan Manuel Santos is saying openly, either by his own volition or maybe there's been a word had, in the back channels. But yeah, I mean, look, this is an unsustainable position. Now, somebody like Maria Fernanda Cabal, she can say what she likes. She's a random senator. And let's also, by the way, let's be honest, Pacho Santos and Cabal were criticizing Biden, and a lot of people said that's very unprofessional. Politicians all around the world have been criticizing Trump for the last 4 years, rightly so. I don't think there's anything wrong with talking about another country's election. That's A, not unusual, and B, perfectly acceptable. However, that's when you're a random senator. When you're the ambassador to that country, look, this is the sort of thing that, we barely even do when we've got really horrible politicians running for power. Doing it in a regular election, that's pretty off. And I would imagine somebody in Biden's team will have had a word to somebody in Colombia to say he needs to go. And I wouldn't be surprised, personally, Brendan, if come December, everybody's looking at Christmas. Nice time to have a little change around, a little shuffle, send him off somewhere else. Yeah, a little bit of musical chairs. I mean, from an interviewer's perspective, I mentioned the Semana podcast. I interviewed the British, the Irish, and the Australian ambassador and the Irish consul, so 4 diplomats. I wish I had interviewed, and nothing against those diplomats, but I wish I'd interviewed Pacho Santos, because diplomats tend to say a lot of things but say nothing. You don't get much controversy out of them anyway. Whereas Pacho Santos would be fantastic to interview by the sounds of things. You'd probably get an interesting show out of him. But anyway,
that's not the only bit of controversy we've had in Colombian politics either this week. The former presidential candidate, former mayor of Medellin, Fajardo, his first name escapes me right now.
Sergio.
But, Sergio, thank you. He's been under attack by former President Uribe.
Yep. So Uribe clearly sees him as a threat for the next presidential election, whoever Uribe will end up backing. I mean, that's got to be a vote of confidence, I suppose, for Fajardo. I mean, look, my Facebook is already lit up with people criticising Fajardo, and I understand that. You know, he's in the same way that Keir Starmer in the UK, or even Joe Biden in the US. You know, people want. He's not progressive enough for a progressive. He's not right-wing enough for a right-winger. I guess what he banks on is the middle ground, the centre ground.
Whisper it, Claudia Lopez even as well.
Yeah, she definitely seems to be going in that direction, yes. A year and a half ago, I maybe wouldn't have agreed with you. 2 years ago, let's say. Now, yes, absolutely. Very, very, very different situation. I do wonder... with this, you know, Fajardo's back in the news. I do wonder if we're starting to see now the beginnings of the election cycle. Really, Fajardo's made a bit of a statement saying that he wouldn't work in any capacity with Gustavo Petro. Now, politically, that's a fantastic move. Morally, I quite like Gustavo Petro. He's not somebody I particularly want to have a drink with, but I think his heart's in the right place, and I think he. For all his many, many faults, he genuinely does want to better the lot of humble Colombians, of poorer Colombians. Whereas, I don't think that's true of anyone else. Fajardo's a bit of a chameleon, a bit of a snake. He'll jump under anyone's political banner, sell his grandmother to get elected. But, you know, people like those people. They liked Tony Blair. They like Keir Starmer. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to I don't think if he was president, it would be the worst thing in the world. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and I think most people, well, I won't say most people, a lot of people might say that if he had gone up against gone up against Duque in the last runoff, that he might have come out better than Petro. Interesting what you say about Petro, of course, helping a lot of the poorer. It's amazing, like when I'm hanging around in Estrato Dos or Uno here, so the working classes and below, very few of them seem attracted to a guy like Petro, and you're kind of going, this is a guy who would actually potentially, help you out of your terrible situation, or at least make things better than it has been for the last few generations. But nobody seems to go for it.
We see this worldwide all the time, don't we? It's again and again and again.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, just another quick thing on Pacho Santos. I was saying if he does ever go for election here again in Colombia, it should be that song from Pato Banton, Go Pato. It's ready-made for Go Pacho. Just change it to Go Pacho. Will work fantastically. Before we get on to sport, just a quick one. Antioquia, once again, we've got another bank holiday Puente weekend coming up this weekend. And Antioquia is closing down. Not as severe as Halloween, but still... curfews coming in, dry laws, ley secas, and yet again, it looks like Bogotá, we can more or less do what we want.
Yeah, Claudia seems to have started laying off. And I do wonder, again, it's this political messaging that I just don't understand. If she had said in kind of April, May, June, look, the pain's coming now, but it means you'll get a quieter ride later, people would have bought that. And I just... As for Daniel Quintero in Medellin, he seems to be on a mission to absolutely alienate everybody in the city. I don't know what's going on. Not just his lockdown laws, but he's just all over the place. Yeah,
interesting. Now there was a story emanating from Medellin, but the health minister talking now. It's not clear, is this going to become law, a new resolution, or it was just a suggestion, but closing bars in areas of moderate to high coronavirus cases from the 17th, which is after the public holiday. So that's one to watch, I think. There's been no further developments on that from what I can gather.
Yep. No, I haven't seen anything about this. So
okay. So we just have to wait and see. Okay, well, don't shoot the messenger. I saw the headline on Blue Radio, and that's what they were mentioning. So we'll see what happens.
We're going back into chaos, aren't we? We've had this situation this week where, people from certain countries have been banned, then unbanned in the space of about 24 hours early in the week. We seem to have been entering a stage of quiet competence. I wonder if that's about to be undone.
Yeah, maybe they're looking at what's happening in Europe and think, oh, we have to do something now. But we'll see, exactly. Quick one just though, Ollie. I know this came in because it came up today, a press release from Avianca. A few weeks ago, we had a show where there was a lot of uproar about the government potentially bailing out Avianca to the tune of, was it $320 million. Ollie, you've gone all dark on me here.
Oh, dear, oh, dear. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, there you go. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. I hope the cat didn't knock that over. But it's come out that Avianca now will not be taking up the government on that loan. So that should mean that there's plenty more money around for the rest of us here in Colombia, for the Colombian taxpayer.
Well, they won't get any good publicity for that, sadly. I do think the way some of these companies are treated, it's incredibly unfair. I'm no fan of big fat cat companies at any point, but I think it's wildly unfair that there's sometimes absolute nonsense applied to criticisms of certain groups, and it's always interesting to see which groups get the criticism and which groups don't, I think.
Okay. Anyway, we move on to sport, and as we mentioned at the top of the program, a few big games again now with the international window back. Tomorrow in Barranquilla, it's Colombia, Uruguay at the lovely time at 3:30 in the afternoon. If it was a normal times, that would mean nobody would be working at 3:30, but I guess if you're working from home, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. And then Ecuador in Quito on Tuesday. Again, I'll kind of sit on the fence and go, well, 4 points will be good, but this will be difficult because, well, Uruguay, obviously, no pushovers, and they suffered I would say, a relatively surprising loss to Ecuador in Quito in their last game, so they'll be looking to rectify that, and Ecuador seem to be going quite well. So, by all accounts, this might be a tougher 2 games than what they had with Venezuela and Chile in the first 2 games.
Well, Chile was a bit of a test, wasn't it? But I think we have to say that Venezuela just didn't turn up for that match, and they were all over the place. That was shocking. As for Uruguay, I think that's the big ticket match. But having said that, as Colombia can get a little bit complacent in places like Quito. Ecuador, they're pretty handy. It's high. You've got altitude to contend with. Remember, of course, most of the Colombia players, they're not Bogotanos. They're not Pastusos. They're not used to being up at massive heights. For the large part, they're not altitude adjusted naturally. So that's going to be a factor, of course.
Yeah, well, again, you could say the same argument for Ecuador. It's just, as I said, they seem to be doing quite well at the moment. And, there's always a few shocks in this CONMEBOL run to World Cups anyway. You get a few surprises. But Ecuador beating Colombia in Ecuador wouldn't be a massive shock anyway. No. But, again, yeah, I think 4 points, however they get them, would be great. I mean, if they keep on getting 4 points in all of their 2 little mini-game series that they have each time, that'll bring them a long way. Like we saw, I think Argentina drop points. Is that how it finished? 1-1 with Paraguay. The last I saw it was. So,
I didn't know.
Yeah, and that was at home.
I only kept tabs on one match today, Brendan.
Moving swiftly. Well, yeah, just to let people in on that one, in case they're wondering, of course, England played the Republic of Ireland in an international friendly at Wembley, and England won, which doesn't surprise me at all. I think.
Well, there's a question for you. Are you the Republic of Ireland or are you Air? There's a name for you.
Era. Yeah. Well, we'd always say the Republic when it comes to international football, and a bad night for Northern Ireland as well because they missed out on a chance to get to the Euros. But just one little note, and I won't bore people with this, but would you believe that's England's first win over the Republic of Ireland since 1985, Ollie? There you go. Shocking. It goes back, and we all know what happened in 1985. Wonderful year. A certain Mr. Wrongway Corrigan was born. Anyway, just a quick thing on the sport. There is another Colombian and a Rolo in international action north of us here at Augusta National at the US Masters. His first appearance, Juan Sebastian Munoz. And I just checked, that's rain delayed, so he didn't get to finish his first round, but he's on 2 under, 5 shots off the lead of Englishman Paul Casey, and he's got 7 holes left to play. So if he could pick up a few, he wouldn't be far off the lead, and it is his first ever US Masters. So I'd keep an eye on him. He could be worth a sneaky each-way bet for anyone that's interested in those kind of things. Anyway, guys, we're going to move on to our main topic, which we're talking about the weird and wonderful, fascinating world of names and Colombian names, and specifically and strange. And when Ollie and I were discussing this, as you know, we're very diligent in our preparation for this show, as you can tell. I was saying to Ollie, God, I don't know, is there enough to talk about? And then when we sat down to talk about it, God, we've too much to talk about. So we're going to kind of start off with what we would consider strange names, Ollie, and there's a few of them going around in this part of the world.
There really are. So we've got footballers who control the middle of the park with a steel grip, like Stalin. We've got Lenins. There's a fantastic craft beer brewer down the road from me called Hummel. Yeah, it's hard to know where these some of these names come from. I mean, in my university, we're constantly coming across, Yanks and Lincolns and Franklins and all kinds of things.
Well, we know where they come from, but I'd like to know what's the thinking process behind them. So, guys, Colombians listening in, like if you have kind of any old wives' tales or whatever they are, the stories behind where these names come from, because there's one that's kind of reached legendary status. Yeah. Do you want to give us that one, Ollie? That's kind of the one that everyone gets told about.
Usnavy. And the whole thing is, Usnavy, I mean, it's hard at first to realize where it comes from, but the legend says that it's from US Navy boats parked up on the coast.
Yeah, I'm going to say I'm pointing down there because I think on the ticker at the bottom of the screen it's telling us.
Yeah, you'll see how it's
we
written.
Have it written. Yeah, we have it written there. Yeah, so
US Navy. Yeah.
Well, at least. What?
No, you go on.
I was going to say, at least whoever is called US Navy, they have a fair idea what their mother was up to when they were conceived, anyway.
Or at least what she was thinking about. Who was
YMCA,
there? The flesh and the fancy don't always mix up. And I mean, there is a snobbery issue here. Let's be quite clear that when somebody has a name like Usnavy, or what's the one you told me?
Oh, Medinusa.
Medinusa.
Put together, it's, for English speakers, made in USA. Medinusa. I've never met anybody called that, but somebody told me that. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, now I do wonder how many of these, again, I've never met an Usnavy. I do wonder how many of these are really, in actual fact, it's 1 or 2 people. It's not a thing. I did used to work with a guy who claimed to have gone to school with a Russell Sprout, which I'm sure is absolute arse water. But it's a funny idea. But there's an element of snobbery to this. I think, like when people sort of say that story about Usnavy, it's very particular. I mean, obviously the Navy, it's going to be coastal. But there is a snobbery element. Oh yeah, of course, because on the coast they're also stupid and they would only do something like this. You know, there's that kind of. That's not a name you're going to find in Strata 5, Strata 6, fundamentally.
Yeah, and like, you know, where do names come from anyway? I mean, like when we look at them in English, it's not like, yeah, they're the most exciting thing. Like, mentioned this again when we were talking, but McMahon, the surname that's a common enough one in Ireland, it basically means Mac is the Mock in Irish, which means son, and Mahoon, anglicised to Mahan, is bishop. So it basically means son of a bishop. So nothing well, I guess it depends on the era you're growing up when bishops could have sons.
But yeah, absolutely. It's something that frequently irritates me is hearing a foreigner sort of say, "Oh, isn't it strange this name in Spanish?" And sometimes they are. I mean, you do have some really slightly unusual names. I mean, Casalobo, Villalobos. You know, the Villa of Wolves. That's a strange name, isn't it? Villalobos. Sounds very Game of Thrones. But then, I mean, most of them are just really regular. I mean, again, though, Wolf is not a particularly unusual name in England. You know, we've got names like Nutter. And you know, and all kinds of sort of weird names like that. So I don't think there's anything about Spanish that produces weird names. I think weird names just pop up all over the place, don't they?
Although, do we have anyone that's known from the street, as in former presidential or vice presidential candidate? Well, no, presidential candidate Humberto de la Calle. Of course, as you said, he's far removed from being from the street. But yeah, it's an interesting. It keeps on reminding me of Jenny from the Block, Humberto de la Calle. But Angela, I'm glad Angela's got in touch with us because she might have an answer to this. But she's telling us that she's heard of people giving their kids made out of the first syllable of their dad's name and the first syllable of their mom's name for originality. She's guessing, but a strange name, and this is the we just know him as Don Rincon. Of course, Rincon means corner, and he does have a corner tienda. There you go, a very appropriate name. But his first name, and the lengths, Ollie, that both of us go to for this program, I called over just before to the wife to get his first name. It's Eliodoro. Eliodoro. I don't know if you can see that there, but that's.
Oh yes, I've come across those. Yeah.
I've never heard that name before, Eliodoro.
But I can tell you right now, he is at a bare minimum. He's 50.
He's over 70, I think.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's no way you can imagine somebody our age being called Eliodoro. That's not happening. It's like having somebody our age named I don't know, Raoul. It's just not happening. Or Dolores. Dolores, you're not getting a young Dolores.
No, although you did have Dolores O'Riordan from the Cranberries, who was relatively young. She was probably the last.
She wasn't Colombian, though, was she?
Oh, okay, no, from a Colombian perspective, no. But I don't even know any young Doloreses in English, so there you go. No. But no, to be honest, I like the sound of this Eliodoro. If I do have a little Colombian kid, I might consider that as a name. But the one thing is...
they do come around, though, don't they? I mean, one of my students had a little baby Geronimo, which I think is quite nice. And she says it's a popular name.
Yeah, okay. I don't find anything unusual with that, like as that I wouldn't associate it with a young child. I wouldn't... It wouldn't bother me if a young child was called that. But I was going to... about the strange names. I tended to find that in Venezuela, and of course we've loads of Venezuelans now in Colombia, that a lot of the women's names in particular were very different than the standard ones that you get here, like Danielas and Camilas and Paulas, and Angelas, sorry, whatever. But like Rolangeli, I've never met a Colombian Rolangeli, but I know a couple of variants on that name. I know a Rolangeli in Caracas, and then I know a few variants like Rolangi and the different thing. But so I think Colombia generally in my experience, go for more kind of par for the course names.
Yeah, I think it depends who you're talking to. I think there's a lot more fun is had, if you're in kind of strata 1 or 2. I think it's kind of 5, 6, 4 where it tends to be a bit more conservative.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I guess I like actually again a few of the names of my mates in the barrio. Efrain. I always find that one difficult.
Efrain.
Yeah. Alirio as well. I don't know too many. Like I never had them as students. Put it that way. When I was teaching English.
Oh no.
Yeah.
No.
But
they're going to be old.
Well, Illyria's not old. Illyria's your age, Ollie. So
really,
you're considering yourself old.
That's unusual.
Yeah.
Well, grey hairs are starting to come through.
Okay.
I was about to say I'm always surprised there aren't more Bettys around right now.
Why?
Ugly Betty.
Ah, of course. Yeah. But then that'd be a kind of reason not to name.
Who knows? I mean, I had a student called Jaime, and I calculated his age. And I thought, well, he's going to have been born pretty much when Jaime Garzon was murdered. And I said, did your parents say, no, nothing to do with that?
Okay. Actually,
my favourite, I'm sorry, I've just remembered an amazingly funny anecdote. So I quite often ask my students if they know why they have their name. And I can't remember her name now. It's a very ordinary name. And she said, I have my name because it's the name that my father loves the most, because the woman he loved most in his life had that name. And I was like, you mean like it's the name of your grandmother or it's the same name as your mother or something? He was like, oh, no, it's just a girlfriend he had before my mother who dumped him. And I was like, does your mum know about this? Oh, yeah, she's not very happy about it. She never uses, she had 2 names like most Colombians. She said, oh, yeah, she never uses that name with me. She always uses the other one. I was like, it's weird, isn't it? And I do think it's odd, like, do you have a middle name, Brendan?
I do, and it's a name that we're going to come to, though, in a bit, because my middle name is, well, the English way is rather kind of boring, Martin. It sounds like that tin. It sounds
okay.
But Martín obviously sounds a little bit sexier. But I know we're going to come to Martín in a second. But yeah, it is. It's Brendan Martin. And I actually picked a confirmation name when I was confirmed at 12 years of age, which was after the Apostle Simon. So I've never used it, though, in any official kind of...
But I do find it... I always find it interesting. I wonder if I'd been Colombian, whether I would have thought about being Ian. Because that's a decision to make if you're a Colombian, isn't it? You have to decide, are you going with Laura or are you going with Valentina? Are you going with Juan or are you going with Pablo? Are where's your... where's your choice?
Yeah, a lot of the time they seem to have one for the family and one for their friends or other people. Because, like,
yes.
Yeah, you'd be going out with a girl and her name is whatever, Camilla. And then you get to the house and you're saying, oh, like, yeah, I was just, with Camilla at the shopping center or whatever. And then they're all going, oh, yeah, and Paula was, so who's Paula? But that's, so it's the same woman you're talking about. You get confused. We have a few comments in there, Ollie. Do you want to run through them?
Well, Paula Andrea Perez is saying here that she got her name because of the runner-up in Miss Universe at the time, Paula Andrea Betancourt. Never heard of her.
Well, we can find out your age now, Paula, because we're going to check out when she was the runner-up.
Oh, yeah, you're looking for an excuse to be Googling beauty queens, are you? Yeah. Nice work. Angela's picked up on the Ugly Betty point. Naming kids after soap opera characters, very popular. I know a lot were named after... I've come across a lot of Dyana and Carlos's from the 80s. Which always seems to be connected back to Princess Diana, who was incredibly popular in Latin America.
Yeah, that sounds interesting to me. I didn't know that, but so Diana. But Diana is a very popular name. Fair enough. Also, I was going to just say a quick one about, like, I don't know, is it popular that fathers name their eldest son after themselves or not here? Because I was just listening.
Second, yeah.
Yeah, listening to the BBC today, a story about Donald Trump, and when he had Donald Trump Jr. and he was apparently when they were going to with his first wife, we'll call him Donald, and Donald Trump said, "I don't want him named after me. What if he's an idiot?" I can imagine that he actually did say that. That's pretty.
Well, at least if he was an idiot, he'd know it was his. That's for sure.
Yeah, no need for a DNA test here. Anyway, we're talking. You asked about my second name, and it's Martin or Martín, and
they're not the same. Yeah.
Yeah, you believe that you won't find too many Martins in the lower classes.
No, I mean, I've got to say, Martin, for me, I'm assuming Martin has those incredibly tight chinos. He's got socks that are basically invisible. He's wearing those daft little moccasins that you see boys cavorting around in. He drives a big fancy car, and he's got a bloody jumper wrapped around his shoulders. That's Martin, definitely. Okay. In the same way that Usnavy or Jolandi, definitely from the coast. And, likely to be, let's say, from a less advantaged background.
Yeah, because you got me thinking. I can only think of two Martins that I know off the top of my head, and one of them in Barrio Santandercito. I point behind me because it is behind me here. And in fairness, well, he's not exactly upper class, put it that way. In Ireland, he'd be considered a man who likes a drink. In other countries, he'd be called an alcoholic. But he's one. And then the other Martin that I know of is the son of the receptionist in my former employer, DDB. Again, I wouldn't say two, but they might be the exceptions then that prove the rule, because I can't think of any others.
Maybe I'm thinking of younger Martins, but yeah, I mean, Martin is the sort of name that it's a bit like the Juan Piece character. Again, somebody nicknaming themselves Juan Piece. Yeah, that's, there's a reason that character has that name, I think.
Yeah. Are there other names then that are kind of associated with the rich folk?
That's a good question, isn't it? I think
I thought you had one.
Well, no, I mean, I always find how European names are taken. I think Vanessas often seem to be not particularly poor, whereas Jennifers seem to be regular people.
That's
why that is. I don't know. I can't. There's no logic there.
One of my sisters is a Vanessa, and then first cousin who's exactly the same age or more or less of Vanessa is Jennifer. So there you go.
Now, but hang on. I'm going to guess here. I'm going to take a wild guess here that Vanessa is not as young as a Colombian Vanessa, who tends to be around 20.
Oh no, Vanessa is exactly 10 years older than me. So.
Yeah, there you go, mid-40s. Yeah. And I find that very strange. Like a Sandra in England, I would assume to be, middle-aged, probably living in a suburb, south of England, probably a little bit racist, reads the Daily Mail. That's Sandra for you, yeah? Whereas Sandra in Colombia absolutely could be 24, 25.
Ali, I'm kind of laughing away here because you're going through all the names of my sisters practically. I have a Sandra as well.
Let me guess. I'll take a random wild guess, because you can't possibly have a sister named Maria or Mary. Surely
no,
not.
I don't. I don't actually. No, I don't. But no, Sandra is about 40. Yeah, she just turned 40, so it kind of might prove your theory. And do I know any younger Sandras in back home? I'm not 100% sure. As you said, there's a lot to talk about in this. Another couple of comments. Do you want to get it?
Paula says she wants to name her son Ragnar at all costs because she's such a huge fan of Vikings and Viking stuff. The only problem would be convincing the child's father.
Well, Ali, you kind of have the appearance of a Viking.
I actually have a drinking horn. And in fact, I have a cloak as well, but that's for another day. Ragnar, I mean, I would assume that you could convince quite a lot of Colombian men to name their child Ragnar.
Yeah, I think
Ragnar.
so. Yeah, Ragnar. Sounds all right to me. And then Angela is saying women with a Y in their name. And of course, they are from lower background. Just
Oh,
text.
absolutely, definitely. If, for example, we mentioned Jennifer's, if it's Jennifer with a Y, definitely.
Yeah, no, it's the same with Dyana. They'll spell Dyana with a Y as well. It'll be D-Y-A-N-A.
Dyana, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, well, lady needs a Y. Although you can end
ladies, of course. Yeah. So many ladies. How could I have forgotten about the ladies? Yeah. Ladies with a Y, ladies with an A, ladies with an A-I, E-I. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many. Again, and lady is associated with, I would guess, the lower classes.
I don't think you're going to find, if you went to, let's say, a country club or a gun club in the north of Bogotá, I don't think you'd be coming across any ladies.
Yeah, exactly. Quick one, because again, as I said, there's so much to talk about in this that we are running out of time, but I wanted to mention indigenous, because in Ireland, it's kind of interesting these days. A lot of the richer Irish people are kind of people who might have an opinion of themselves anyway, like to go to old Celtic or Celtic, if you want to pronounce it that way, names and old Irish names as a sign of status. Whereas here, it's unusual. Any kind of well-to-do family would be calling their children after somebody from a Koji tribe or the Waju. It would be very unlikely.
And it is interesting, isn't it, that we're starting to, there does seem to be the shoots of recovery there on people giving indigenous names out. There are a few indigenous surnames that still pop around. There's a cyclist called Darwin Atapuma. Again, some cyclists with wonderful names. Darwin, that's a good one. Parents probably aren't that religious. Winner, ironically not that successful.
Yeah.
Not bad, notice. Just not necessarily a winner, let's say.
But it is, yeah. The deference to Spanish here, considering it's a Spanish colony, like obviously we know the reasons behind it. It's that it was kind of the old Spanish, or the new Spanish kicked out the old Spanish, so it wasn't that the indigenous took over the place. But I got a copy of a new book, The Viva Effect, which is basically a panegyric for Viva Air. But anyway, I was reading that, and the initial name for Viva Air was FAST. It was an acronym of whatever, but it was an acronym in English. But when they eventually got their license, the Aero Civil, or the Department of Aero Civil, that gave them their license, aviation license to fly, initially suggested that they change their name, and I quote, in the name of the defense of the Spanish language, that they wanted something more Spanish. Now, in the end, they dropped that requirement. So you will see FAST on all Viva Air aircraft, because once you're registered with that name, that name, you have to keep it. You can change the commercial name, but the name behind it, you cannot change that. So you'll always see FAST.
SAS, yeah. I have seen that. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. But yeah,
well, we're almost time up, aren't we?
Yeah, I think we are. We didn't even get to people, mixed families, I was going to say, like foreigners and Colombians who've had children, and what the naming process, because an Irish friend of mine who's married to a Costeña, I think, they live in Medellin now, and they have a daughter, and my Irish friend is from a rather Irish-speaking part of Ireland, and he insisted that the child would be called Mairead. Now, you can imagine Colombian teachers and any Colombian trying to pronounce that, spelled M-A-I-R-E. I think there's an A father, which is the Irish accent D, trying to pronounce that. Ridiculous. But so lots to get. It's probably something we'll touch on in other episodes. One final message there, is there, Ollie?
Well, we've got just time is coming up from the producer.
Oh, sorry. Really?
So we might say, next week, shopping.
Oh, yes. Because we've got the Dia Sin Eva Saturday week, and all these Black Fridays and things like that coming up on Black Days. So shopping in Colombia. Where do you go to get shoes that fit your enormous feet if you're a foreigner of a certain description.
To a canoe shop.
All that next week, guys. Thanks for listening.
Bye bye.